18 Russian armored vehicles, heavy rain as they're called, 1 kilometer from the tree line at Nivka. If they slipped into those trees, close down to Nivka's western gate falls. Russia bet everything on the storm hiding them. At exactly 06 a.m., November 13th, the sky turned traitor. Rain shut off like a faucet, clouds dripped open. One high-altitude drone caught the gift. 18 burning heat signatures crawling west across open mud. 2 kilometers of clear kill zone. No cover, no second chance. Inside the bunker, 5 seconds of silence. Then one voice cut through. Lock acquired, launch everything, now. The window was open, and Ukraine wasn't going to waste it. The jamming didn't ease in. It slammed into the sector like a wall. On the Ukrainian screens, it wasn't random static. It appeared as a dark, expanding ring, swallowing drone icons one by one, as it pushed west at the exact speed of the Russian convoy. That was the pain. Not the drones, not the rain. The cut. Inside the Nivka command post, the assessment was immediate and cold. If that ring reaches the tree line before we finish the strike, we lose all contact. The convoy was exposed now, but the window was shrinking fast. Ukraine didn't have minutes, they had seconds. Operators watched telemetry blink out, then vanish, then return in fragments. The fight was no longer about firepower, it was about outrunning a digital blackout, before those 18 Russian vehicles disappeared into the trees. Ukraine had to move first, or not at all. What Russia intended as a perfect electronic shield carried the far, subtle, but fatal. As the jamming ring expanded across the map, Ukrainian operators noticed something the Russian crews couldn't see from inside their armored cabins. Along the western edge of the interference zone, a thin distortion seam appeared, a narrow strip where telemetry didn't vanish, but worked, almost as if the jamming field was stretching beyond its optimal power range. On the drone screens, it was visible as a faint shimmer, not a gap, just instability. But instability is all a skilled operator needs. Inside the Nivka command shelter, the room shifted from concern to calculation. The senior UAV officer issued a simple directive. Ride the edge, keep the targets in the seam. That seam became Ukraine's benefit, a narrow path where drones could maintain partial lock, without fully entering the densest part of the jamming field. Operators rerouted their reconnaissance drones to skim that stable zone, feeding stabilized thermal markers back to the kill chain. Within seconds, the convoy structure became clear again. Lead vehicles bunching slightly in the mud, support trucks drifting just off alignment, 2 armored carriers lagging behind the main group. The Russians believed they weren't visible. They weren't. Their own jamming bubble was outlining the formation like a spotlight. With updated coordinates flowing back through the scene, Ukraine now had everything it needed: distance, spacing, engine type, and heading. Enough to build a firing solution before the window closed. The result came quickly. The strike package that had been held on standby for most of the morning finally received the order. Release the swarm. Priority targets marked. The first wave of Ukrainian drones lifted from concealed launch points west of Nivka, banking low toward the convoy's exposed flank, moving under the jamming ring, not through it. Russia believed the EW was protecting their advance. In reality, it had just given Ukraine the exact path needed to hit them. The Russian column never heard the attack coming. While the jamming field pulsed outward, Ukraine's strike package swept in low, FPV units flying barely 5 feet above the mud, using the tree line as cover. The Russian crews were focused forward, pushing through the worst stretch of the farm road. No one expected a hit from the west. The first drone found them at 6:07 a.m. A single explosion tore through the fog, green, sharp, and devastating. The blast hit the second vehicle in the formation, a P2, acting as a forward infantry carrier. Flames shot upward through the hatch. The vehicle stalled in place, blocking the narrow lane. And with that, the entire column froze. The ping for Russia was immediate. Their convoy, already stretched across slippery ground, was now locked into a choke point with no room to maneuver. The mud that had slowed Ukraine's drones was now trapping Russia's armored advance in a straight line. Ukrainian operators capitalized instantly. Using the unstable seam on the jamming ring, they pushed a second wave of drones through the corridor. 3 more FPVs struck in rapid succession, one shredding the tracks of a BTR at the center of the column, another rupturing the fuel compartment of a logistics truck. The third detonated next to an infantry carrier that had tried to reverse. Within 60 seconds, the convoy's formation fractured. Vehicles were pointed in different directions. Engines screamed as drivers fought the mud, spinning their tracks deeper into the roadbed. The Russian EW shield was still active, but it could no longer keep pace with the chaos on the ground. This gave Ukraine the benefit they needed. With the column immobilized, Russians had to dismount, and dismounted troops are easy targets. Thermal feeds showed infantry spilling out into the muck, trying to set up defensive positions. But the fog that had shielded the convoy now turned against them. Ukrainian operators saw heat signatures clearly, while Russian squads could barely see 10 meters in front of them. The result hit fast. A third wave of drones punched through the seam, and straight into the immobilized vehicles. Secondary detonations rippled across the line. By the time the smoke thinned, 6 Russian vehicles were destroyed or abandoned. The Russians believed they were under electronic protection. Instead, they were trapped inside their own shield. And the first blow had landed. The moment the first 6 vehicles went down, the Russian formation unraveled. The convoy's knee tanks attempted to pivot off the road, but the ground to both sides was a swamp, soft clay, standing water, and tracked trenches from the night before. The tracks sank instantly, locking the heavy armor in place. One attempt to accelerate only buried the T-80 deeper, its turbines screaming uselessly into the fog. This was the pain. Russia's 18-vehicle push was designed for speed. Now it was stuck, compressed, stationary, and exposed. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones circled above the tree line, feeding live thermal overlays back into the command post. Every engine plume, every dismounted soldier, every attempted recovery effort appeared as a bright target on the screen. Inside the convoy, discipline cracked fast. Russian infantry tried to fan out along the roadside, but the fog hid the mud pits and drainage ditches. Men stumbled, disappeared waist-deep into the muck, or regrouped in tight clusters. Exactly the patterns FPV operators are trained to look for. That created Ukraine's benefit, a clear, predictable map of Russian movement. The kind of pattern drones can strike with mechanical precision. From 3 concealed firing points west of Nivka, another strike group of FPVs launched, flying low, hugging the barge line, threading the unstable seam of Russia's jamming bubble. These were slower, heavier drones, armed with ship-charged payloads, meant for armor, not infantry. Their targets were obvious, the vehicles still intact, but unable to move. The result unfolded in under 2 minutes. 2 FPVs slammed into a T-90, attempting to tow a damaged BMP, detonating the tow rig and crippling both vehicles in one strike. Another drone hit the rear fuel truck, sending a fireball rolling across the mud and pushing Russian infantry back into the open. The convoy no longer resembled a military formation. It was a scattering of isolated crews shouting into radios that no longer worked, vehicles burning at irregular intervals, and officers trying to reorganize under a sky full of Ukrainian eyes. Every attempt to recover a vehicle invited another hit. Every cluster of soldiers became a glowing thermal signature. And every second, the jamming bubble drifted forward. The more it revealed how far the Russians had lost control. What began as an advance was now a breakdown. A column trapped in the mud, divided by fire, and reacting instead of acting. The collapse had started, and Ukraine was about to exploit it. By 6:12 a.m., the Russian commanders still believed the situation was recoverable. Smoke was rising, vehicles were down, but the column was not yet declared lost. Orders were still moving, crews were still responding, and the command net, though strained, was intact. Ukraine saw something different. Not chaos, opportunity. Drone operators noticed a brief, repeating signature in the thermal feed. 3 vehicles positioned unusually close together at the center of the column. Not fleeing, not maneuvering, just stationary, radiating heat differently from the armor around them. Was the command spy? A battlefield without a commander can still fight. A commander without a battlefield can do nothing. Ukraine didn't wait. A fourth wave of FPV drones launched, but this strike was not aimed at tanks or infantry. It was aimed directly at Russia's decision-making core. The communications truck, the observation van, and the single armored vehicle carrying the convoy senior officer. 3 drones, 3 hits. The Russian net went silent in under 15 seconds. No fallback channel, no alternate control point, just dead air. And when the radio died, the convoy died with it. Tank crews no longer knew who was moving, who was hit, or who was firing. Infantry didn't know whether the drones overhead were friendly or enemy. Vehicles attempted to reposition without coordination, and collided. Gunners fired blind, far, but even they were supporting units that were no longer there. This was the true break point, not the mud, not the drones, not the terrain. It was the loss of command. From that moment on, the Russian formation was no longer a force. It was 18 isolated crews making individual decisions under fire, with no shared picture of the battlefield. Ukraine issued the final order. Prepare for the last phase. The convoy wasn't retreating, it wasn't advancing, it wasn't fighting as a unit, it was finished. With the Russian command spine gone, the fight no longer resembled a battle. It was a creative operation, fast, precise, and methodical. Ukraine's drone team switched from suppression to elimination. The fog that once concealed the convoy now worked in Ukraine's favor. Thermal cameras cut through it cleanly, marking each surviving vehicle as a bright, isolated target. This was the pain for Russia. They weren't withdrawing, they weren't maneuvering. They were sitting still. 18 armored vehicles reduced to pockets of stranded steel, each one too deep in the mud to escape. Operators in the Nivka command post began executing the final sweep. A new wave of FPVs launched low from the western fields, flying rapidly up to avoid the last remnants of the jamming ray. These drones weren't searching, they were confirming. The targets were already pinned in place. Ukraine used the benefit of total situational awareness. The drones fed back real-time thermal outlines of crews huddled behind stalled armor, infantry pinned along the roadside ditch, isolated vehicles with no supporting fire, and 3 tanks still running engines but unable to gain traction. FPVs struck one after another, measured hits, not chaotic ones. A drone dropped into the turret ring of a T-90. Another clipped the rear compartment of a BMP, igniting ammunition. 2 more targeted infantry clusters illuminated by the aerial feed. Every impact opened more space. Every secondary explosion erased another piece of the Russian formation. The result was decisive and complete. By the time the fog began to thin, only a handful of Russian soldiers remained combat-capable. They abandoned the vehicles and moved east on foot, leaving behind burning armor, ruptured fuel trucks, and a kilometer-long trail of wreckage. The once coherent convoy had been reduced to charred silhouettes across a field of mud. Ukraine didn't celebrate. They simply confirmed the last heat signatures, transmitted final coordinates, and cleared the airspace for artillery to finish off anything left intact. At 6:22 a.m., the battle that began with an 18-vehicle Russian advance ended with silence on the Nivka road. The sweep was over, and the field belonged to Ukraine.